Okay, this is going to be a quick video on live booleans. If you don't know what a boolean is, it's basically when one shape inserts into another shape and the result of the combination between the two. You can either subtract from it, add to it, or get sort of a cross section. The one we'll be focusing on is subtraction. So I just have this cylinder shape, put it through its Dynamesh, has enough geometry, and I will go and duplicate another shape. You need two things. So you need the shape that is going to be booleaned, and you need the shape that is doing the boolean. Some software call it operand. We're just going to call it boolean. First thing is to make sure that it's scaled enough that it can pierce through the entire mesh, if that's what you want to do, or at least inside. And the next step is simply to turn on live boolean in the upper left-hand corner. And once you turn that on, nothing seems to be happening. You have to go over to the subtool section, and you have the first tool, the original one. This is the copy that's going to do the boolean, and you can see these options next to the shape. The first one is just the standard, it's just two together. The second one is the one we're going to look at, is the subtraction. Once I turn that on, you see that it disappears, and you see the leftover. You can see how one shape took the chunk out of the other shape. Now by turning off an on live boolean, you can see what's actually happening. The great thing about a live boolean is that it's live, so I can continue to move it around to get the shape that I want. It's nice that you don't have to commit it right away. If I want to put a full hole through it, just push it in. Now again, if I turn it off, see what's happening here. That's why you want this shape that is doing the boolean to be a little bit bigger. Gives you more options. The next thing to talk about will be live boolean sets or groups. So I have this one right here. Right now they're not in a set, they're just two subtools. Now if I turn this little arrow, if I push this little arrow button right here, it says start and it says 2, which means it has two subtools in its group. If I click this one and then I duplicate this one, make sure all tools are visible, I turn live boolean on, you can see that like before, this one is being booleaned into the first shape. This one is still set to its original, so therefore it's not being booleaned. If I turn it like this, now you can see that I also have that one is being booleaned. But if I press this button, and I press this button, you can see that now I have two groups. This group has two subtools in it. This group is just has one. So I can boolean a whole different way in here if I decided to duplicate this one. Here it is right here. And I'll turn this to subtraction. You can see what's happening right now. This section of boolean, this set, they are not interfering with the first boolean set. So you can have multiple Boolean sets at the end. And you can get really complex with how they're organized. It's a good way to keep control over how many Booleans are applied to one subtool. You might not need to use sets, but you can see that it can be useful if you have a bunch of Booleans going on and you want a certain number to be applied to one shape and a certain number to be applied to another shape. It's a good way to organize it. So the last thing I'll talk about is when you're done, if you just exported this shape out and brought it into another software, it's going to look like this when you import it in. That's because since they are live Booleans, they are not committed. They are not permanent. They are still previews because you can still move them around. Once you're set on what you want, you have to go down to, in the subtool, down into Boolean and say make Boolean mesh. Now this is to allow dynamic subdivision if you want to turn this on. Otherwise, it's just going to be the resolution that we currently have. So once we do make Boolean mesh, you'll see that we have a new subtool here. And because in the first one here, we have two groups, two sets here, and we go to the permanent one, it kept the sets separate, but it combined everything that was in each set into a subtool. So this is also a nice way to, when you're finished, being able to keep everything together. So that's all there is for live Booleans.